Everyone. I hope you guys are doing well. This lecture is really focusing on different strategies when you're drafting a personal narrative, especially to make that process a little bit more straightforward, as well as helping with some organizational issues that you may have. So, in getting started, it's really important to know that while writing a personal narrative, the end result needs to have a very clear plot arc. Creating your first draft doesn't have to be such a linear process. The most important thing about writing a first draft is getting started. So, by starting with a specific scene or a moment that comes to mind first, or even a moment, an element of that story you're most interested in, or that's even just easiest to write, that really just gets the mind going, and it, of course, gets you one step closer to having a completed draft. Then after you finish that scene or that moment, if you once you finished writing it, then you can move on to write the different parts of the narrative arc to make that clear and put it in chronological order. Another strategy that can help you get started, if there isn't a specific scene you have in mind, is just to give yourself a timed free write. So when you give yourself 5-10 minutes to just start writing, that can really get the creative juices flowing, and you can really get a good start on an essay that way. And then, of course, you go back and revise it, take out where you went off topic, or move things around depending on where it fits into your overall story. So, in terms of the organization of the story, we do, of course, have a hook. We have an intro paragraph. This is, of course, the paragraph that is grabbing your reader's attention, that is introducing kind of your writing style, the characters, even background information, depending on your options. So, we do have a lot of different options for the first paragraph of your personal narrative. For instance, you can just describe the setting and information to establish the background or exposition. So if we think about fairy tales, they often start with once upon a time to set up the time period. So this was happening a while ago. So if we think about that, then that can be really effective to ground and kind of get you in the moment, get your readers in the moment that you're writing about. You can also start with a direct quote or dialogues between characters. So, this is a way of really establishing the voice of the characters for your reader. It also puts them specifically in a moment so that can really grab their attention and really make them want to find out why this conversation is happening or what this conversation is about. Another strategy is to begin with an active scene that depicts a specific event. This is very similar to what Liz Huerta did in her story, The Game, starting with very intense so that it's pulling that reader in with the description, with the verb tense, so that they're wondering what is going on, what is going to happen in this story. And finally, our last strategy, another option you could use to present a hook to begin that intro paragraph, is to just introduce the overall topic or issue you are addressing through your story and really establish that you're beginning the reflective process. So, for instance, if your story is addressing issues of racism or immigration or gender differences and stereotypes or double standards, you can begin by talking about that issue before you present your experience with it through your narration. The most important thing for the hook or the intro is figuring out what works best for your story and what works best for you as a writer. So, once we get to the body paragraphs of your personal narrative, you really want to focus on separating different body paragraphs to clarify the different elements of your story's plot arc, primarily because the longer the paragraph, the more likely your audience is going to get lost. And of course, the less likely they're going to understand the point of what you're trying to emphasize. So, as a general rule within personal narratives, and of course within a lot of different essay types, we want to start a new paragraph whenever you change topics. This really establishes the new part of the conversation that you're having or part of the issue you're talking about, and of course, what it is you're saying about it. For personal narratives specifically, we tend to change paragraphs when you change locations or time periods just to establish that a change has happened to make it easier for the audience to follow along. In a very similar way, we also change new paragraphs when we present a new scene in your story, and also when we change dialogue between speakers just to clarify who is speaking to really establish kind of that conversation. And lastly, when a paragraph is getting too long, we want to start a new paragraph in order to give readers time to pause and think about the events of the story so that they can make sure that they're following along, they know what it is that you're trying to say, and of course, then they can also reflect and kind of think about what it is they should be taking away from your story. For narrative writing, paragraphs can be only a sentence long if you want really to emphasize a point. You do have a lot of freedom. Finally, when we get to the conclusion, the ending, the reflection, and of course the denouement of our essay, where we have a distinct resolution, we do have a lot of different strategies we can use because ending your personal narrative can be a little tricky, especially because you don't want your story's ending to be too abrupt or too long, in which it feels like it's not a real ending. So you do want your resolution to be clear at the end. One rule of thumb is it should be at least one paragraph long with at least 6 sentences in that paragraph. Another way of looking at it is your resolution, your conclusion could be 1 to 2 paragraphs long. That is if you have more you need to kind of bring to a close so that there's not any questions left unanswered at the end of the story. So, in that resolution, in that conclusion, you can reflect on the experience that you wrote about and its importance for you, or even its importance for readers in terms of what they should be taking away from that experience, the lesson you want them to learn. You can also discuss the problem you experienced or the problem that you want to address through presenting this story. That really would be focusing on stories that relate to societal issues that are occurring right now. And lastly, in terms of this, you can also present a call to action or a call for change. In that case, you'd be directly talking to your audience and telling them that they should do something or they should fight for a specific change for whatever reason, depending on what topic you're using. The biggest thing to note for this conclusion reflection, you could do a variety of those 3 different things. It's really dependent on what is the main conflict of your story, as well as what you really want your audience to take away.